Good afternoon, everyone. I am Deputy Commissioner Jason Marsh of the Virgin Islands Police Department. First, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to come out this evening to this public forum as we discuss our consent decree. Here with us today, we have my Director of Internal Affairs, my staff, not my staff, who works with me, Captain Merit Benta, Change Compliance Management Unit, have the Deputy Chief, Assistant Commissioner Elsko, Assistant Commissioner Brooks. Here, as we get into discussion of where we are with our consent decree, where we came from, and the stuff and the things we have done to gain compliance with some of the paragraphs. Also with me, I have Dr. Cannonier. So these individuals are very instrumental in working with us as we complete the tasks that are required for us to gain substantial compliance. Although the consent decree is mostly operational based, these individuals help aid operations in the investigations and the things that are needed to have thorough investigations. So with me, I have the independent monitor, Ms. Sydney Roberts, and her team. Ms. Roberts will introduce her team.
Good evening, everyone. And as Jason mentioned, thank you so much for coming out today. What I'd like to do is introduce myself, tell you a little bit about my background, introduce the members of the team, talk a little bit about our company and what our role is as a monitor and how we fit into this process. So back in November of 2022, the federal judge appointed me as the new federal independent monitor for the Virgin Island Police Department. My background includes 20 years of law enforcement experience. My last position was as chief of the Illinois Secretary of State Police. I also spent about 10 years as an inspector general investigating fraud, waste, abuse, government corruption, and misconduct. And just before joining Jensen Hughes, I was leading Chicago's Civilian Office of Police Accountability. That was an agency that investigated all officer-involved shootings, complaints of excessive force, and other egregious complaints of misconduct. I'm an attorney. I've been with Jensen Hughes for the last 2 years, actually. It'll be 2 years in June. And I'll tell you a little bit about our company, but before I do that, I'd like to introduce two other members of the monitoring team. Bob?
Hi, thank you, Sydney, and hello, everybody. My name is Bob Bomer. I've been with the Jensen Hughes for 7.5 years now, working on assessment works. As Sydney will talk a little bit about Louisville Metro after Breonna Taylor, Minneapolis after George Floyd was killed, and but lots of others that didn't make the news, working with police departments to help them improve and to work with them in the communities to kind of help them improve. My background is I started on the Chicago Police Department. I left there, became General Counsel and Chief of Staff of the State Justice Agency, which covered the gamut from crime prevention all the way through to corrections and post-corrections. After that, I spent some time at University of Illinois, and our focus was on community engagement. Not only teaching community policing and teaching community engagement for police departments and communities, but also actually going out with departments, providing technical assistance, help them work with communities to address issues regarding violent crimes and drugs. And thanks for letting us hear. Ed?
Thanks, Bob. Ed Denmark. I'm a senior consultant with Jensen Hughes. My background is 31 years in policing from the state of Massachusetts. The last 20 of those 31 years, I was the chief of police for 2 separate municipalities. Back in 2018, I started working with Bob and some other members of the organization, doing some assessment work. As he mentioned, Louisville was one of our projects. Minneapolis was another project. I've retired from my full-time service summer of 21, and I kind of wasn't good at sitting home, and I wanted to help, so I went back to work full-time with them as of January. As far as the assessments go, my area of focus is usually use of force issues, community engagement issues, and my formal education, I have a doctorate in organizational leadership and development. So we look at not just policy and procedure, but how we can look at agencies and organizations holistically so they can operate better with the community, both externally and internally.
Thank you, Ed. And as I mentioned, these are two members of our team. We have 6 other individuals that are working with us as part of the monitoring team. All 6 of them are former chiefs of police, Boston, Massachusetts, Charlotte, Richmond, Charlotte, North Carolina, Richmond, Virginia, San Jose, California. And we also have one gentleman who is a former DEA who spent considerable amount of his time working in internal affairs. As they mentioned, our company, Jensen Hughes, has been consulting in law enforcement for over 15 years. Primarily, we do assessments. Assessments are basically looking at an agency, identifying what are they doing well, where are some opportunities for them to improve, with the ultimate goal of getting better process, better outcomes, and better relationships with the communities that they work with. We do a lot of work in terms of critical incident response, as Bob and Ed mentioned. You know, after the killing of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, we went into those communities and did a top-to-bottom assessment. We also will serve as professional standards investigators. So sometimes agencies will have a officer-involved shooting, and for some reason, maybe it's not right or appropriate for them to do that investigation. So they may hire an outside entity to come in and do that investigation. We do that investigation on behalf of the police department to provide some credibility to the investigation that that precipitated the request. The other things that we do is work with the Department of Justice and other state agencies that are under similar consent decrees or stipulated judgments. We do a lot of work with the COPS office to include authoring the law enforcement best practice guide, lessons learned from the field. I provide this context so that you feel comfortable that we have the experience from not only as practitioners, but also from doing assessments throughout primarily the mainland. We've done some work overseas, but primarily on the mainland. And one of the things that we want to do is to hear from you, to hear from the community what your experience has been and what it is like in your engagements with the Virgin Island Police Department. We spent the last 6 months going over the department's policies, reviewing some cases. We've probably talked to more than half of the people that work for the Virgin Island Police Department, but we haven't heard from you. And as I mentioned, our background, I've worked in law enforcement in New Jersey, in Chicago. We've got Chicago, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., Charlotte. We don't know, we have not policed on an island. We have not lived on an island. And we have not lived here in the territory. And so hearing from you is so critical, because as we work with the men and women of the Virgin Islands Police Department to identify the path forward, looking at the policies, making sure the policies have all the requirements that are required from the consent decree, but that the processes established to implement those policies are efficient to reach the ultimate goal that they're trying to do. We need to know what you're experiencing. What are you seeing? What do you see that the department is doing well? Where are some opportunities for them to improve? So really appreciate you being here. We're here to listen. One of the things that we will be doing in the very near future, I hope to have it up by the time I got here, is we're establishing a website. On that website, there will be all the activities that we are undertaking as part of our role as monitors. All of our reports will be there. That will be a way for you to reach out, ask us a question. That'll be a way for us to communicate with you, or one way that we will communicate with you about what we're doing, or if we're hosting a listening session. Those are some of the things that we would like to do in the next couple of months, is to listen to you and hear directly from you. So look forward to working with you, and hopefully we can answer any questions that you may have about what our role is, and the things that you may be experiencing, so that we can help the Virgin Island Police Department to get out of this consent decree, which I think is everyone's primary objective. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. So what is a consent decree? A consent decree is an investigation by the Department of Justice into an agency And when that investigation determines that that department has a pattern and practice of violating individual civil rights, that department is taken to federal court and hence a consent decree. As you notice in a lot of stateside departments recently, they have been under consent decree for violating individuals' civil rights. Ferguson, prime example. So now, how did we get here? In 2004, the Department of Justice investigated our department for civil rights violations. During that investigation, they determined that we, the Virginia's Police Department, did have a pattern and practice of violating individual civil rights. In 2005, they issued us a letter telling us these are the things you need to fix. Policies, these are the things you need to put in place. Training, these are the things you need to ensure that you do. Have your supervisors monitor your officers, ensure that they are good. Patterns and practices. The department at that time did not complete the directives in that document. Hence, the Department of Justice took us to court. 2009, March of 2009, we were issued a consent decree. We have been in that consent decree from March 2009 to present. Although we have been in the consent decree for that long, we have made substantial progress. Progress meaning the training portion of the consent decree have been removed. That has been done because the department have consistently showed that we train our individuals based on the policies that we have. The in-service training that we provide is what's needed to ensure that the officers do what's necessary as they engage the community. So we're very proud of that. Yes, there are some things that we still need to work on, which are some of our investigations that can be more thorough. And we are working with that. We work with our supervisors, we work with our commanders, hence where we have the change and compliance management unit, who are our internal monitors. Their function is to audit us, to ensure that we are doing, as a department, outside of the independent monitoring team, that we as a department are doing constitutional policing. As they audit their cases, if a policy needs to be reviewed or revised, they let us know. If there's a pattern and practice of an officer doing any particular thing, they let us know. But also, our department has an early warning system, which is our IA Pro. We get alerted once there are officers that consistently get reports. We get alerts that let us know we need to pay attention to this officer before it gets too late. So that's done to ensure that we're not leaving officers that are a threat to the community or a danger to the community without checking to make sure that they're good. So it's not just to ensure that they're not violating your rights, but we need to make sure officers are good as well. So that system triggers and allows us to see if that officer needs some type of intervention, whether it be training, whether it be counseling, whatever it may need at that time, that's what that system does. So with all of that, from 2004 to present, our department have made a 160 turn, or 180, sorry. So we have totally turned around. We are confident in our investigation skills of the incidents that may have been reported. We are confident that our use of force investigations are 100% better than they were, although we know that we still need some sort of training and improvement, and actually continuous training, because constant improvement can only make us better as a department as we engage the community. So we wanted to hold these public forums so the public can have a good idea of what the consent decree is, ask the questions that need to be answered by the individuals that have the answers. So we held it in St. Thomas, we held it in St. John last night, and we're here in St. Croix today, because we want to make sure that we give each independent district the opportunity to speak to us and have that conversation with us one-on-one or in this public forum to answer those questions. So we will ask you to ask questions while you're here and give us the opportunity to respond in reference to the consent decree, or we know that some of you may be here for crime-related matters, right? Either which way, we do understand that it's all relative. It still relates to the consent decree because it's our officers making contact with the public. And we understand that some of those encounters may not be the best. And we know that we train, or we may need to train some of our officers to have better interactions. We are aware of that, and we're good with that because there's no perfect department. And we aim to ensure that we improve our customer service because that's what it is. It's a customer service business, believe it or not. We provide a service to the public, which are our customers, our community. So with that, if Sydney doesn't have anything else, thank you. So to aid in the transparency of the department, we have implemented the body-worn camera program. That program, all uniform officers have been issued body-worn cameras. Those cameras are utilized during interactions with the citizens. They're recorded, and if there is an investigation, that recording is reviewed. Because we do know that individuals act different when they're on camera. And we want to ensure that we get an objective view of what is occurring between the citizen and the officer. So with that, it aids us in transparent investigations because then we see what the officer says, the citizen says, along with any other evidence that we may have for that investigation. So that in itself would aid in our investigation, aid our supervisors in the investigative processes. So with that, we anticipate that will help us with our investigations, which in turn help us with thorough investigations, which in turn helps us come to quicker conclusions, which in turn helps us remove those questions that are unanswered questions that may have been occurring with investigations without video evidence, which will help us get out of this consent decree. So it helps us all around. So while I know we did a study actually, because we did apply for another grant for more body-worn cameras, and since implementation, we've had a 6% decrease in citizen complaints. In use of force investigations, well, it helps us realize that sometimes our officers didn't report force. So it may sound like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing because it's helping us see things that we would not have normally seen without the body-worn camera. So as this tool helps the department, it also helps us better police our community. So anything on this? All right. So with that, I would open the floor to any questions that you may have in reference to whether maybe consent decree related or anything that you would feel that you would need a quicker or clear response to. We're here to answer those questions. This is impressive. In the back.
All right, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
My name is Al Francis. I came in a little late, but I heard you mention several things that place the police department under the consent decree. And I'm trying to inquire, you made mention about training. What about how you do in the other areas? And that placed you into the consent decree. I think it's like 4 of them you listed. And you made mention that you guys are doing better in the training aspect. But I'm curious of the other areas where you're at. And what is the plan to ensure that we continue the course to get us out of this consent decree? Because when I look at it, there's millions of dollars being spent on this consent decree. And oftentimes when I speak to the officers in the street, and it comes to that of doing policing, they seem to be fearful of doing policing because of the consent decree, because of that mindset. Okay, if I do something for force, then I'm being reprimanded for it. Now, I don't know if it's they don't have the clear understanding of what powers they have, but I'm really disappointed because the community as a whole don't respect our police officers. And that is not good. So again, I just want to know where we at in terms of getting out of this thing, because for me, I don't see us in the Virgin Islands doing the brutality that we see in the United States. And for the love of God, I can't understand why we're on it at this point. So at some point, somebody got to say, hey, look, something ain't right here. Because we don't treat our people in the Virgin Islands as they do in the United States. So why are we putting this bill upon ourselves and these millions of dollars are just being spent to someone to say, oh, you're not complying? I don't get it. So if you can tap on that for me, I much appreciate it, okay?
All right, so I'll start with where we are. So with the 41 sub 51 paragraph there was previously, the training was removed, which brought it down to 41. So we gained substantial compliance in December of 2018 with all the paragraphs. However, January 2019, moving down, we as a department did some things that we could have done better. Hence why some of the paragraphs were removed from compliance. So that's something that we did, and we recognize that. Hence why we continue to train the officers in the confines of the law, not necessarily the consent decree, because the consent decree is the law. So the use of force now, are we, as a department, we ask our officers, when you use force, properly document it. Say what you did, when you did it, how you did it, why you did it. That's the requirement. And we're asking the supervisors now, when they conduct their investigations, look at the force that the officers used. Was it lawful? Did they have a lawful reason for being there? If they did, then what was the resistance of the citizen compared to the force used by the officer? So now, correct, we do not have excessive force issues here. Our issues are investigatory, thorough investigations. Mine now, it's not a great number of them. Hence why we feel comfortable with this team, because we're looking at it at a different holistic review. So understand that we were under a different monitoring team for a number of years, right? And which they turned interim. And as a department, we recognize that maybe we need to do something different. Maybe we need to look into another monitoring team to see, because we feel comfortable saying that we are good at our investigations, but we can be better. And we want a team that can recognize that. So I hope that answers your question. So we are not restricting officers from using force. We're just asking them to do the who, what, when, where, and why.
If I can, Jason, if you don't mind, what I'd also like to add is one of the things that we as monitors are doing is we're focusing on where is the root cause? What is the root cause that is preventing the Virgin Island Police Department from achieving that substantial compliance? And I'm going to tell you, it's less than in 10 paragraphs. I mean, they have come they've come a long way from where they were before. And so what we're doing, when I say we're looking at root cause, we're looking at, is it a policy? Is there an amendment to a policy? Is the policy clear? Looking at the staff, do the staff know what it is that they need to do? Do they have the staff that they need to get done what needs to get done? And so our approach as Ed mentioned, and he may chime in here, but we're focused on identifying organizational performance because we realize that individuals are not perfect, individuals are not robots. What we're looking for is organizational performance. So our focus is on what we say kind of the 4 Ps, looking at the policy, looking at the process, looking at the people, looking at the performance on an organizational level. That approach is something that we've done in other agencies. That approach has been helpful in getting those agencies where they need to be to not only meet compliance for a quarter, but to meet compliance consistently over time. And that is what is required here in the Virgin Islands, because once they reach that substantial compliance status, as they did in 2018, they have to maintain that for 2 years. So we, as the monitoring team, we don't want to get them there for this quarter. We want to work with the department to get them to a place where, as an organization, they are operating in a cohesive, consistent manner that addresses the things that need to be addressed, and they can do that over time. Our approach is to not tell them what to do. Our approach is to work with them to identify what works best for the Virgin Islands, and then to build that up. So we've had success in other places, and we're hoping to bring that same success here. I don't know, Ed, if you wanted to add anything that talks about our approach.
Yeah, so a little bit about the approach, and I appreciate your comments, because what we often find when agencies are under consent decree or any other outside scrutiny for their performance, the first thing that happens is the officers in the field are threatened because they don't understand that, they go to work every day doing a good job in their mind, and to now be placed in fear that they're going to get in trouble for doing their job, or they may lose their job for doing their job, that bothers them. Part of, as Sydney mentioned, this is about not just policy, but it's also process. And if there's a lack of understanding on the officer's part, what that process means, or if we find that there's a gap in how the process is being implemented to a point where it's confusing officers, those are things we can help to correct. Because again, the goal here is long-term behavioral change that's going to make the officers confident in going to work, that's then in turn going to increase the confidence of the citizens and the officers. So I guess if I had to sum it up, the consent decree is always seen as something punitive. And I think our approach is, it's not punitive, it's we're here to monitor to help you fix what's broken, as opposed to beat you with a stick and keep you under this dark cloud. Our goal is to wrap it up and get it out and get it done.
Just to add to what Ed and Sydney are saying, if we look at some of those agencies that recently went under consent decrees, the things that they are mandated to put in place now, we've had in place for a number of years. So it's not that we are behind the 8 ball. We're actually ahead of a lot of agencies, and we are proud of that. So as we move forward, we intend to be a model agency, which I think we already are. But we will lead. We will be an example for a lot of agencies to follow.
Testing. Good evening, all. First, I'd like to commend the Virgin Islands Police Department for having these VIPD consent decree town hall meetings. But I'm most surprised not to see more residents, citizens in here, because I've worked for PD and a good bit of people here are from VIPD. So I just want to commend you guys for educating the public. But I know that this consent decree has been upon us for a while now. So what would help us to expedite getting out of this consent decree? Would it be more training? Would it be more equipment? Would it be more funding? So, as you know, I'm here as a citizen also, and as a legislator. So funding is one thing that I ask. Is it more funding that you need? So just a basic question, and just to commend the VIPD for your efforts.
So if you're going to ask about funding, I will always say yes. I would always say we need more funding. But honestly, we need to do what we need to do, which does include training, which does include trying to sometimes change the mindsets of some of our people. So it's us. And I really believe, I strongly believe that we want to change. We want to have these investigations. We want a clear path. So some things may be confusing to some of our people, and we recognize that. So we will work together with the monitoring team as we revise some of our policies. Because we're actually in the process of revising some of our policies for more clarity. And that is what we believe will help guide us to be removed from the consent decree. But again, if you have more, we will definitely take more funding.
Okay, follow-up question. For my earlier question, Al Francis once again. I heard you mention that trying to get the officers educated in terms of their ability to really do the enforcement, the training aspect of it. How are we going to go about getting their confidence that says, hey, look, if you enforce some kind of discipline onto the individuals, whatever, you need to report it, it's not going to be punitive on your side. What are we doing to increase their confidence to actually do the enforcement? Because that's really what it boils down to. If I have fear that if I do some type of enforcement, I'm going to be punished for it, then potentially I'm going to say, well, yeah, I'm going to see that and leave that alone, okay? So that's really the heart of the matter when it comes to it, because as we know, we got a lot of crime here in this community. And like I said before, when speaking to a lot of my basic officers, they oftentimes talk about the consent decree. And I was like, let's stop using that as an excuse, okay? You have a job to do. If you see a crime being committed, let's go ahead and knock it in the bud. It's that simple. So if we're saying that they have their hands handcuffed because of the consent decree, how are we going to break apart those handcuffs? Because we need that here in this community.
And I think as a department, we probably need to share stats more with our officers. When I say share stats, I mean the 99% of the use of force cases that are investigated are justified. Almost majority of the cases that are citizen complaints that are made are not sustained or a different disposition. So maybe we just need to get the message down to them that it's okay, the force you use is justified. During the training, we teach them the force to use within the laws. The equipment, we have annual in-service training. So they train with the equipment annually. They train with the firearms twice a year. So we go through use of force training and use of force documentation. When they have their entries, if they need to be corrected, we have individuals that work with them in correcting the entries that what needs to be in those entries. So maybe we just need to get the message directly to them instead of through the supervisors or commanders, directly to them that, hey, it's okay. You're doing your job and you're justified in doing it. So maybe that's what we need to look at. I hope that answered your question. Thank you, sir.
Good evening.
Yes, thanks. Good evening. My name is Mary Moorhead, and I would like to make a comment, but also ask a question. You said the training is pretty much done, and you mentioned the constitutional area, so I was wondering if it was just a focus there, and in what sense was that training done? Because recently I've had two different personal contact with police, and to my estimation, it's not about is the able to analyze the rule of law in the situation to know if they are really not violating the person's rights. Because in each incident, it was a violation, as I saw, because they were concerned about the people involved and not concerned with the violation. And to my, the latest, most recent one, it's a situation where not being able to analyze that there is a violation more so than, because it wasn't a cut and dry situation.
Okay.
And I think there's more training needed there, and so much to the point that I got arrested, it was vacated, but when it's vacated, I told the officer that I appreciate the fact that he recognized the vacated because there was no violation, but it was a matter of the officers not knowing and understanding that there was no violation. Right? So I'm wondering if the training deals with the analytical skills of understanding what they're dealing with when they're in a situation. And if you could tell me, when was the body camera implemented, and what is the regulation as to when an officer can turn it on, or rather turn it off? Because again, in the situation I noticed when the officer turned off the cam, and I was wondering about that. And, but specifically, please make sure that they understand, because it's someone that they know and recognize as having some specific stature in the community, that they're intimidated by that position and not focusing on what is really taking place. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Moorhead. So just so we can kind of be clear, so when I said training is removed from the consent decree, that just means it was removed from the consent decree. That doesn't mean training was done. We have continuous training yearly for our officers. We have in-service training, which references domestic violence, ethics, interpersonal communication, constitutional law updates, even local law updates. So I'm not sure exactly what happened in your situation, but I'm sure if that officer made a mistake, as you said, we can speak to the deputy chief, and we can have a conversation of what went wrong there so we can fix it. If the officer needs training, then we can send that officer for training. If the officer needs to understand what was the difference in the law, or why that arrest happened and was vacated, then that's something we can work on. So that may not be an issue for that officer alone. That may be something that we need to address with all officers. So that's something that once I'll ask you to make contact with DC Cornelius, and then once you meet with him, then we can have that discussion on what needs to be done to correct that situation. The body-worn camera, that was implemented in April of 2022. So April of last year, fully implemented. When they turn it, so the policy requires that when they interact with a citizen, or who may be a suspect, or a traffic stop, there's several specific things, but the camera should not be turned off until the end of that interaction. So from the beginning, or probably even before we got to the scene, the camera should be on, and then when the interaction with that citizen is complete, that's when the camera should be turned off.
Greetings.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for having this community meeting. And I thank the previous person who spoke, because of her sharing the information about the meeting. I am here tonight. So I don't know where your PIO?
PIO, yes.
I don't know where they released the information, but I never heard it but on a particular show. I really appreciate this opportunity, because I've been doing my best to meet with the special review board, the third party. That's what it is, right?
The independent monitoring team.
The independent monitoring. Because I've posed this question, and I was hoping the commissioner was here. Is he here? He is not.
No, he's not. We have the acting commissioner.
Because he said to me in February when I saw him that he was going to be over on St. Croix in 2 weeks and we would meet. It has not happened. And I've done my best to work with the hierarchy of the police department. But I'm trying to figure out from you, or find out from you, what discretion does VIPD have in terms of dealing with the Federal Bureau of Investigation? Can the local police department ignore a request from the Federal Bureau of Information when it relates to a homicide?
So that's a kind of broad question. So I would
Okay.
have to know specifically what
Okay.
you're talking about.
I appreciate
we
that.
can do that
yes.
on the side if you need to.
No, I would like to speak publicly
Okay, go
about it.
ahead.
The FBI did a firearm residue analysis. They requested from VIPD a supplemental information. To date, VIPD has not submitted the supplemental information, yet has done their best to ignore the murder of this police officer. And I brought it to everyone's attention since I got the FBI report, and no one wants to touch it. But this is a request from the Federal Bureau of Information, and I think that the local police department has a fiduciary responsibility to look out for the welfare of all the officers. If you do not look out for the officers, who am I? So I'm taking this opportunity to come to you tonight and plead with you to ensure that VIPD doesn't pick and choose what murder investigation they want to go forth with. When FBI requests certain information, we should give it to them, because whatever they do is going to be in our best interest. And some have deemed my concern, because it's a family member, that it's a personal issue. No. The FBI requested from this department specific information, and to date, they cannot. And I'm talking about a police officer who was murdered when he went for lunch. And to date, FBI cannot get the supplemental report that they've been requesting. And I was hoping and praying I could have settled this with Commissioner Martinez, but to be waiting for him since February, I think it's crucial that our VIPD have the check and balances where they need to have it. Because if a policeman could get shot down in the street while he's on the job, that's why our little boys are falling down and nobody seems to care, in my opinion. Please, work with the FBI so that we could get to the bottom of a lot of these senseless murders that we have here. And you have criminals walking, but yet still, this officer, quote unquote, was troubled, so it was good to get him out of the way. And if some of you remember, years ago, there was a big investigation with an illegal lottery scheme that was busted. And that police officer is the one who busted that scheme. And for that reason, to date, I think is why they're trying to not go through or follow up with the FBI supplemental reports. I'm pleading with you. Please. Our local department needs check and balances, then let it be. But we need to make sure that we look out for them too, especially the ones that have been murdered. So far, I know there's 2. The young lady that was murdered in the police report room, in the police laboratory room, whatever, and this other police officer. So I'm asking you, please, ask VIPD to supply this report, because I'm sure it will cross the T's and dot the I's of a lot of cases. With the kind of behavior that has happened with this particular case, I see where a lot of criminals are allowed to just walk away because they have friends and families. So I'm sorry, but I had to say this publicly because I've spoken to everybody, and everybody has done their best to just squash it. Everyone has, and they have the evidence. They have the supplemental requests. They have the detective report. They have the first officer on the scene report. I mean, this is just one case. But I really appreciate, you looking out for every other case.
All right,
And
thank you.
our officers, our hierarchy need to be put in check when it needs to, but they need to be supported too. So I love blue. I love the gold and blue. With Allah, what will we have? But I'm a thorn to some people's behind. And some of them are right in here this evening. And I'm gonna get it. But I had to come and say, ask you to please work with the FBI, especially with the murder of a police officer. Thank you so much for this time.
All right, thank you. You know him, right? Okay. All right, thank you very much for that. I'll speak to the chief and look into that, all right? Any other questions? Oh, this is nice.
So I have a question for you guys. Are there, if I asked you to identify those things you feel that the department does well, what would be some of those things that you feel that the department does well? That it's a service that they provide that you think that they do well?
Same guy.
Thank you again. Thanks for that question. I saw a police officer just the other day stop and counsel an elder because the elder was a little confused. Somebody it was a hit and run. And I listened to the officer, how he counseled him, and I thought that was very touching. And I appreciate, because there are a lot of caring officers here. So I see where they should be commended when they do stuff like that. But, some of them, just because they're off, they will pass an incident and just go straight. But there are many that stop. So when I saw that happen, and I stopped to help first. The officer stopped behind. So I was able to look, listen to the interaction. So I think we're blessed to have some well-trained officers. And sometimes that's all we need, to encourage them. Hey, somebody don't have to stop you for you to just stop and inquire. Because we didn't stop him, but he stopped and he inquired. So it was a need for his guidance. And I appreciate officers like that very much. And this guy right here, this young man in front here, let me get his name. Cornelius, his interaction with children. It's very important. Maybe you need to start adapting schools and not just make the schools. I heard that the schools are police substations now. I pray that's not the case, but adapt the schools, and maybe give the officers incentive to be in the schools, and to participate. Not just wait for Cops Week to take the children out shopping and, but more interaction, because Virgin Islands Police Department made a difference in my life. When I think about officer friendly with the police cadet program, I should have been a lawyer. I would have tackled VIPD where I need to tackle you. I mean to be emotional, but police pre-cadet was so instrumental in my life. Sometimes they took me camping. They were engaged with us. So you need to get back to doing that. And reward the officers for doing good, man. Encourage them, give them that incentive. Because a lot of the men in this community are dropping the ball and leaving it to a bunch. How much men have you hired in the last couple years? Seems like you're hiring more women than men.
And that is a fact, because mostly for testing, most people that pass the test are females. Most people that apply are females.
Get back to the children. Get back working with the children. I think that made a big difference in my life. And I'm sure, you know, you don't have to throw away the baby with the bathwater. You know, keep these things going, please.
Thank you for that.
All right.
Thank you. Any other things? What I heard was, I heard compassion, I heard empathy, I heard mentorship. What are some other things that, in your experience, either you've experienced it, seen it, or heard it, that the department does well? And you guys know the next question is, where are some opportunities to improve? So let's get out what they do well first. All right. So let's, oh, wait, okay, we got to take it. All
Hi,
right.
good evening. I think,
Good evening.
it's not on?
Yeah,
Why
it's
is it-
on.
It's on. He's doing his job. Good evening, everybody. I think with the climate of policing in the United States and even in predominantly black areas of United States, I think those 5 police officers, I think it was in Detroit, we had that very bad incident. That we in the Virgin Islands, even though we are a predominantly black society, that our police officers do not feel, on the whole, when they put on that badge and that uniform, that they are lords over us, that they can do whatever it is, that uniform gives them the license to do whatever it is that they want to do, to act out on their own aggressions, to find ways to circumvent the law, so for their own gain. We're happy that we can live in a society where driving while black is not an issue, while black is not an issue, while breathing while black is not an issue. And that's one of the things that we really thank God every day for. I have a 22-year-old grandson, and I worry about him every day when he's in Texas. He's 6'4", and he's 22 years old, and they call him a gentle giant. However, he's just a step away from being a statistic. Our teenagers here don't have that issue. So I think that's one thing that we all have to just pray and thank God every day, and to be grateful that we don't live in that type of society. And our police department, it brings its own issues, because a lot of you guys are family, a lot of you ladies are family to us, so it brings its own issues and things like that. But when you're talking about life or death issues, that's the biggest thing. We all want to live, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
It's on.
Thank you. And you brought up your son, or your nephew?
Grandson.
Grandson. So, I'm a mother, and I live on the mainland. My greatest fear is that phone call. My number one greatest fear is that phone call.
Good mic.
And I have spent 20 years in policing in the mainland, and that is my greatest fear. So I do understand that. And that is a luxury that you have here. And I wish we could get some more of that. I gotta make sure I don't get emotional. That's not what I'm not supposed to do that when I come out here. But look at this: respect, compassion, non-bias. I'll put here, I couldn't think of the word, fair. Fair, trained, willing to be mentors. There was a gentleman, I think you're still here in the back. I hate to say it, I think your first name is Al. I probably should. Al. You know, you talked about making the officers feel good about the job that they have to do. See, when they know that you feel like this, about them, and that's been your experience, then they feel good about doing the job that they do. When the department is able to let them know that if you use force, because you have to use force, we just need you to articulate why you did it, what those circumstances were. When it gets to the chief, he looks at it and says, okay, yes, this is why you did it, and that's consistent with the law. Then you guys and the officers are able to continue to do that. And so that dialogue is incredibly helpful. And that dialogue and the officers doing what they're doing, the supervisors reviewing those things in the manner that is required by the consent decree. And I'm not going to lie, it is labor intensive. There is additional administrative work that the supervisors have to do. And I'm sure many of them would rather be out on the streets having more engagement. But that's the things that are required by the consent decree, both here, both in the mainland, to make sure that someone is looking at the officers for what they are doing and why they are doing it. When I was at the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, our job was to look at use of force incidents. And these were generally complaints of excessive force, lots of officer-involved shootings. And the one thing that no matter what that result was, when we would sit and tell that family that that shooting was within policy or that shooting was outside of policy, they were more happy that there had been an investigation. The fact that the outcome, it didn't necessarily matter at that point. They wanted to know that there was an investigation. And that's what this consent decree is about. And so making sure that the officers understand that, making sure that you understand that, that's the way that we get buy-in. As we talked about, we're looking at organizational performance, right? So it's getting buy-in from the community for why this is happening, getting buy-in from the officers, getting buy-in from the supervisors so that everybody knows that there is a vested value in this process. And so that we see this for us, that's good news. Because as I said, we've heard from the police department, but we haven't heard from you. So continuing to have this dialogue is incredibly helpful to us. So that second question that I was going to ask you about, where are some areas for the department to improve? From your perspective, yes, ma'am. I think you've got a mic.
Pleasant good evening. Crime is a community issue. I think a big problem we have here is a lot of unsolved homicide. I believe the reason is this lack of trust in the police because it's a small-knit community, the population is low, and the chances of a suspect being related to a police officer is an issue. So I'm wondering, how could that be addressed? What about the idea of having persons who are not from here on a rotation basis, coming from the States or Puerto Rico, or even from St. Thomas, to resolve that issue, because we have a lot of unsolved murders and people are not talking because they're afraid if you speak, you will be the next victim because of lack of trust and confidence in the police department.
And the lack of trust is the officers disclosing. I'm sorry. Just to be clear, the lack of trust is the officers disclosing your identity or the identity of other people.
What do you think about the idea of bringing police officers who are not related to anyone here in the community?
I'm going to refer that to them. Just real quick, I should make clear that as the monitor, we don't step in the shoes of the police department, so we don't run the day-to-day operations. We rely upon them to police the community. Unfortunately, we don't get to, or fortunately, actually, having been there, fortunately, we leave the running of the police department to the Virgin Islands.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So first of all, the officers being related to individuals in the territory. I think that we have brought officers from St. Thomas to work in St. Croix, and we have brought officers from St. Croix to work in St. Thomas. We have done that over the years. but realize we're still one territory. We're still a very small community. So the trusting issue, if there is, in fact, officers that are given information in reference to any investigation, and we know about it, and we are able to identify those individuals based on facts, right? Now, we have to be based on facts that are given to us. We deal with those officers. In reference to citizens being known when they give information, understand that we solve crimes, we go to court, the court doesn't accept this person said this. If we don't have video evidence, we need that individual in court. Don't remember which amendment it is, but the one that the right to confront the witnesses. So that's a thing that's not just here locally, that's nationally. That's based on constitutional law, not just us. So what we do, and I know this for a fact, when I work major crimes, we protected the identity of those witnesses up until the last minute of court. And when we did that, because we wanted to make sure that that citizen felt secure, felt safe in giving us that information. We also have individuals that may give us information, and we take them off island, while to ensure that they feel safe giving us that information. So there are things that we do to try to secure our witnesses or secure the individuals in the community as they give us information. Unsolved homicides. I can say recently, at least within the past year or two, our homicide solvability rate have been almost, I wouldn't say, well, 60%. As it happens, we are maybe even better, right, Chiefs? Okay, so, yeah, the Chiefs tell me, looking at me like, yeah. So they have been a lot better. And believe it or not, we do a lot with what we have. If we were to update a lot of the equipment or receive some of those equipment and be able to analyze some things locally, we would be so much better. So I think that we are doing a lot better. Yes, there are some homicides that are unsolved, but remember there's no statute of limitation to homicides. So as new information comes, we can still find those individuals and prosecute. I think in St. Thomas we just prosecuted one that was over 30 years old. So we still have to keep those cases active. Once we receive information that helps us to solve those cases, we ensure that we take those cases to the AG and we prosecute those cases. So we are working on building trust, and that's how we build trust, by making arrests. Yes? Oh. Okay, DC Cornelius.
Good evening, community. In relations to your concern about trusting the police, that is one thing that we try to put out there in relations to Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers is there to assist those in our community that feel unsafe, feel that they cannot trust the police. When you make that call to 1-800-222-TIPS, that call is picked up off island, it is vetted, and then sent back to the island to a contact person. That contact person then makes contact with the chief's office, and that information is passed where it needs to go so that it can help in whatever situation that we might have on island. So in terms of trust, try Crime Stoppers to kind of make you feel a little calmer or a little more safer. So that is where we'll put the comment in relations to trusting the police here.
And also to add to that, in reference to bringing officers from off island, we have in fact recruited off island. And most times when those individuals come here, they probably might last 6 months, a year. So it has to be a need to want to work within our community. And I think our officers who actually live here and work here are doing a hell of a job based on how we are treated at times, right? So sometimes, not saying the community is bad, but we get cursed out a lot. And the officers live here, so you curse the officer out today in uniform, then you see him in Pueblo the next day. So it's a circle, it's a small community, but we still are able to police fairly. And again, they do a hell of a job. And we don't tell them enough. The community doesn't tell them enough. We have compliment forms. An officer, a citizen would see a supervisor and say, officer did a great job today, as the young man pointed out. Put it in writing, send it to us, so that can become a part of the officer's profile, where they can see that, hey, somebody's appreciative of what I did. So those type of things help build morale and help they go out and do better with the community as well. Ed?
Yes. All right, just want to make a comment. I'm hearing a lot of great things here, especially Sydney pointed out some of those things on the board. And I just want to pull that back and just say that's not just between the officers and the community, the respect and the compassion, no bias, trained mentorship. That also has to come from internally from the department to the officers, the feeling of internal procedural justice. So that kind of is why the consent decree can be helpful. Because the consent decree it doesn't just look at your policies, it says, are your policies being applied appropriately that call for these other things that are going to bring the organization together holistically. And to the woman's point about fear of investigations or having officers related to suspects, again, that's a point that the decree has us looking at processes to make sure that if there is a case where there's an officer that's related to a suspect, there are things in place that can call that out and handle it so that people can deal with it. It's when you don't have those processes in place or people don't trust the process or don't understand the process that those instances happen and then that trust is gone. So again, if I can get one message across here, it's that this consent decree is not punitive. This is for growth. This is a growth process. And if you can embrace it as such, the chance of coming out of it faster and better is greatly improved.
Thanks, Ed. Where are some other opportunities to improve? Some other opportunities to improve. What are some things that you would like to see the department do differently or do additionally? Differently or additionally? All right, we got a lot of VIPD in here. You guys can say stuff too now. I'm not your boss, so you can say stuff. I made you say it. You can blame it on me. Yes, sir.
Listen, I don't want to reiterate what I said earlier, but when DC just talked about trust, when the commissioner refuses to deal with the evidence in his possession about the murder of a police officer and refuses to adhere or to supplement the information required, how do you build trust? How do you go back to trusting them when the commissioner himself is ignoring the murder of a police officer and the evidence that's in his hands?
You're saying follow-up. There needs to be some follow-up.
I didn't want to be emotional in front of you, but the police department has been instrumental in my upbringing. Mm-hmm. So I'm about blue. And when the highest level of the agency turns a blind eye to the murder of a police officer, he'll turn a blind eye to the murder of anybody else. So when I'm hearing everybody talk about trust and this, listen, start with your own self. So we need the monitors, because the monitors are supposed to help us be better at what we do.
This conversation helps, and so we're going to go back. What are some things that the department can do better?
Follow up as I suggested. Thank you.
Additional.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mario Brooks. I'm right now acting Commissioner for Virgin Islands Police Department. I'm sitting in for Commissioner Martinez. So you have not heard from him because outside of this forum I can't divulge, but there's a reason why you have not heard from him. I want to put that out there, one. Two, I can assure you that I spoke to him earlier today. Commissioner Martinez, first and foremost, sends his warmest regards to everyone for coming out. But I can assure you that any homicide, any type of violent crime is at the forefront of our interest here in the Virgin Islands Police Department. So please don't ever think that we diminish or we look down on any type of case. We do not do that. I want to put that out there, okay? I'm unaware of your situation, but I ask you that after this is done, we can meet on the side, myself and ACL School, we can have a discussion with you to see exactly where you're coming from. Because I think it's against the better judgment of the Virgin Islands Police Department. They're taking a hit on the leadership when I am unaware. I'm not sure if ACL School is aware that you had this discussion. So this is something we'll discuss with you offline, okay, after this is done, if that's okay with you. There was talk about trust. So when it comes to trust within the Virgin Islands Police, I want to talk about something specific. We talk about bringing in personnel from different areas. Guys, this is a unique place that we live in. The Virgin Islands is a small community. The officers that live here, that work here, they invested here. They are invested here. I have kids that go to school here. So everyone that gets, every shot that's fired, I'm thinking about my daughter. I think the monitor talked about it herself. I dread hearing that phone ringing at night. And believe you me, they call. AC, I know Sid gets the same call. AC, we got a shooting again. Our heart starts to beat because in our mind we want to know what now. What again? So if you are feeling it, trust and believe we're feeling it twice as hard because we live it every single day. We have to be the ones that go into those hospitals and hear those parents crying. We deal with that every single time. I feel your passion. We all do. There's not a police officer in here tonight that don't feel your passion, that don't understand what you're going through, because we all live it every single day. We do. So when we talk about bringing in people, yeah, it's all fine and dandy. I think the DC mentioned it. We brought in people in the last 2-3 months, or yeah, at the most, some of them, and they're going right back. There's no vested interest in this territory other than the people that live here. Let's be real. We live here. Every homicide affects us just as much as it affects the actual victim and the families. I want to make sure you understand. That is why the passion is so serious when it comes to us. You may feel that these cases are not being solved, but we've done a very poor job. We talked about it last night. I think we did speak about it last night. We've done a poor job of keeping the public informed as to what's going on. Because there's some cases where the suspect themselves, the person that we have as a person of interest for that homicide, themselves have been killed. We have those situations going on, but we've done a poor job in this community as a police department. We're working so hard. That's why we brought Director Glendrate on board. We're trying to do things like bringing these type of forums online so that we can keep the public informed. But we've done a poor job, and we're trying the best to do that, of keeping the families of these victims, keeping the community informed. We're trying our best to get it done. We've made strides. DC March talk about it. The arrest rate for homicides have been increased. So when I hear crimes, homicides have not been solved, oh, trust me, they've been solved. We can produce the statistics to show you. We can show you where homicides in the last couple of years, we've closed 20 cases last year, I think, alone, just with homicides. So the cases are being closed. It takes time, and we only get one shot at it. One shot. Okay? We only get one shot at it. We cannot go and just arrest someone. We get one shot at it. After that shot, if we miss, that's it. That person is free. So we have to make sure we cross all our T's and dot all our I's. These investigators humping day and night. Lieutenant Joseph and the rest of the commandos, those investigators, they're humping, they're collecting all the information they can. But it takes time. And I know you want instantaneous. I know we watch TV, we see arrests in an hour on TV. That's not reality, guys. Let's be real. That's not reality. You do not close a case in an hour. For the first 48 when a homicide occurs, these guys are humping 24 hours straight, trying to collect as much information as they can to try and get resolution to these cases. So I know it's a lot. I know you're hearing this, but I'm telling you for a fact, you have to give your Virgin Islands Police Department an opportunity. I know you've heard it before, but I can assure you the leadership team that's in place, we are adamant that we will close these cases, and we are adamant that through Director Glendrate, we'll get that story, or we'll make sure that story gets out. We brought in new monitors to help us be transparent and make sure the information is put out there so you can see for yourself the work that's being done. It's being done. We just need your support to continue giving us this information, continue reporting through ShotSpotter. And I can tell you, this is my 30th year on the job. I've yet to hear one citizen that was impacted directly from giving us information in my 30 years on this job. I've never heard of any. And I can assure you, I can find anyone that is sworn personnel here will tell you in their time they've never heard of any either. So don't feel that you giving us information is going to cause a problem. We put measures in place. We have ring-down cars. We have Crime Stoppers. We have these different entities that allow you to give us the information. We even put our rewards out there for their information. But I can assure you, your information, when it comes to us, it will be protected. And like DC Marsh said, until the last possible moment, i.e. if it's a homicide, then we will adjust it. So I ask you, please, to continue doing what you're doing, and we will continue doing what we're doing, and we will improve. This is your Virgin Islands Police Department. We are you. You are us. There's not a single person in the Virgin Islands that don't either know or related or associated with some police officer. Think about that.
All right. Well, thank you for letting us hear directly from you about what your community experiences, both positive and negative. And the one thing that I will say about this lack of trust, all of the things underneath relate back to that trust. So for us, I think this was a good conversation. It was very informative. I think it was informative for the members of the police department to hear this from you. And I heard you guys talking to each other, and so I think that is a really good thing, and hopefully there'll be more opportunities for that to happen. I know we will be back, and we'd like to reach out to you guys again, and so we're going to work with some folks so that when we do the outreach, you know that we're here. We'll have the opportunity, if this is a good location, we'll come back here and have more of this dialogue, because you have just as much of a vested interest in the Virgin Island Police Department getting out of this consent decree as the men and women that are working in the Virgin Islands Police Department. And so together, I believe that can happen. And so really glad we had the opportunity to talk to you. And I think Mr. Al's got a question.
Okay. Good evening once again, Al Francis. Just two things. You asked what it is that police department can improve on. And I would say retention. Before I move on to the retention comment, Acting Commissioner Brooks, thank you for those comments because you were right on point. In terms of retention, you know, I've shared with some of the officers, one of the things that we ought to look at in the police department is you train officers here in the Virgin Islands all across the spectrum and everything in policing. Many have left these islands and gone to the United States, get promoted up the ranks pretty quick. And when they do so, they inform the other police officers within your rank. And what do? They leave the Virgin Islands. So we continue got a bleeding of our department. And if we find some kind of way to incentivize the department, say, i.e., after 3 years of serving the police officer here locally, we make it in such a way that they can own a home. Just like Uncle Sam does. When you do your first enlistment, you don't have a family. Somehow the other young man get a young lady pregnant. What do you think happens? He re-enlists. If we ensure these police officers have some kind of when we come home, then the likelihood of them leaving the department is far to none, right? So it's just something we should try to pursue with our senators and see if we can make that happen. Okay, I've been saying this for quite some time. I love my police officers. And it's personal to me simply because my mom is a retired police officer. So I've been around it for years. I respect my officers because the job that they do is much more dangerous than when I was in the military. When I go, I know who the enemy is. Police officer doesn't know that. And it's a blessing for them to return home every evening after their shift. Okay, so I think we got about to start trying to ensure that the officers we train here in the Virgin Islands, we keep and retain our officers. Because I constantly hear it all the time. We don't have enough police officers. We don't have enough police officers. And nobody's addressing why we don't have enough police officers. Let's stop the bleeding and find a way to retain our officers here in the Virgin Islands, okay? The other point had to do with when we talk about crime, and I made mention before, one of the panelists had said that we view the consent decree as punishment. As oftentimes when I came up a long time, we get counseling, we often view counseling as something negative. Until the leadership got it across that it's not always negative, it's performance-based. So I would say that we got to go back in and ensure all our officers clearly understand the consent decree is not here to punish you, it's to improve your performance. And that's where we're missing the message. They got to understand it's not a punishment, so don't be fearful of it, and do the policing that's required here in our community. Thank you.
All right, I think I got everything. And I won't be taking a picture of that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. In terms of improving how the police department can do better, my suggestion is, I understand we can never stop crime. Crime will always happen. But what we can do is utilizing technology, such as surveillance cameras. That will help the department, will help the officers, detectives to solve crime faster. And it will make the public think twice before they commit a crime. That's my
Thank you for that.
I still believe all of these help with improving, I still believe all of those things go back to help to improve this trust. And the one thing that we do know is that if the police and the community trust each other and are working together to solve crime, crime goes down. I mean, that's just a fact. All right, I think I'm done now.
Anything else? All right, any other questions, comments? All right, well, there being none, again, really want to thank the territory for the individuals that came out, St. Thomas, St. John, St. Croix, giving us comments, giving us feedback. Trust, we're taking notes, and we will do some follow-up where follow-up needs to be done. So this is not the last forum, it's just the first of many. And we think it was very important that we're able to hear from the community, and they provide us feedback with everyone on this panel to be able to answer the questions that you may have had. So again, thank you all very much for coming out. There's some refreshments in the back. Please enjoy. Chiefs, anything? ACs? All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.